Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 13 December 2015 and I think we're going to have a little therapy session. And I need the therapy. You see, I don't know, less than a year ago, maybe 8 or 9 months back, I had a Strider SNG. It was a very standard model. I think it was S35 VN blade, black G10 Lego handle, and there's a reason that I chose a Lego handle when I bought my first Strider. I find it to be the most ergonomic in hand of the three ways you can get a Strider SNG handle. You have your Lego, which is your blocky, textured finish G10 and blocky titanium frame side. Then you have your concealed carry, which this knife is, and it gives you a smooth sort of satin G10 that is contoured, and you can see it gets very narrow at the edges, and then correspondingly the titanium side is also contoured, and the whole knife is very slim and sort of slippery, which makes it easy to get in and out of the pocket, easy to get your hand down past it to retrieve other items that are in your pocket. I find it to be a little less solid ergonomically in hand than the Lego. Frankly, it's a little slippery. And when you're opening the knife, there's not much of a ledge for your fingers to be on when you're flicking the knife open or sweeping it open, even if you're, spidey flicking it open. Obviously, my hand has gotten used to this one. This is mine. I sold my Lego handled Strider after I had it, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months. It just wasn't doing it for me. I got to a point with it where the idiosyncrasies and the, let's say, weaknesses of a Strider started to bother me more than the appreciation for the ergonomics and cutting ability and durability of the knife impressed me. And I've got this sort of predisposition against Striders anyway. I'm not a big fan of Mick Strider or Mickey Ray Berger, the man with the nebulous resume, and a lot of stories that don't add up, and not a guy that I would like to emulate, certainly not idolize. But in those, 8 months or so that I didn't own an SNG, I started to sort of yearn for one, and I had bought a knife in between, in the interim. In fact, I might have sold my SNG to sort of recoup the money I spent for this other knife, maybe. Don't remember that clearly. But anyway, I had purchased a triple-aught design TAD Dauntless Mark IV, sandblasted frame and green G10 scale, and you guys know that knife. I've got a video out there on it. There are lots of videos out there on it. It's, well, in form, it's very much like a Strider. It's got a very long ricasso, a big forward finger choil, and sort of a short cutting edge, as a proportion of the overall length of the knife. And the differences, of course, are, it's got a bayonet blade, and it's hollow ground for just only a little more than half of its breadth. It's sort of a knife that looks really, really good in pictures. Good construction, good quality materials. Knife is on ball bearings, which I realize that most guys like. I don't. It wasn't a bad knife though. It had some sort of funky ergonomics when you came forward on it. The jimping was sort of on a raised shelf and then fell off sharply, a big step down to the spine of the blade. When you came forward on the knife, that ledge sort of hit my thumb in a funny place. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't a natural resting place. It was, frankly, the ergonomics were okay, but it was pretty obvious after I owned the knife and handled it and cut with it for a while, at least to me, that the knife was designed more to be photogenic than it was to be good in hand. Although it had features that would indicate it had excellent ergonomics, it just didn't quite add up once you put it in your hand. The more I owned that knife, the less I carried it, and when I did carry it, all I could think about was, man, I wish I had my Strider back. And then I started, that would stop me. That thought would give me pause, and I would think, well, maybe I didn't have the right Strider. So I sort of started to kick around the idea of selling that knife and trying to find a CC. And I digressed, didn't I? I had told you 2 of the 3 handle configurations for the SNG. The third being one called the double gunner grip, which has huge, not sharp and jagged, they do have sort of smooth edges, but huge divots everywhere along the handle, both sides. And guys, they look great when you see them in pictures, but I don't care whether it's in your pocket or in your hand, they're horrible. They don't go in and out of the pocket easily. When you put your hand in your pocket to go past them to retrieve something, they're brutal. And when you try to use the knife, the grip is horrible. So it's just very, very, very abusive to your hand. If you don't have gloves on, it's a horrible knife. And I know there are guys that are going to weigh in the comments and tell me I'm a wuss, and they've carried their DGG Strider every day for 10 years and they wouldn't own anything else. Well, okay, I'm just telling you, for me, the double gunner grip is not a user knife, not remotely. And you know, I've worked on all 3 configurations and spent some time with all 3, and I was a little leery about the in-hand ergos of the CC, the concealed carry, but as you can see, not giving me too much trouble, and I love it in pocket. So how did I get this? Well, just about the time I got serious about unloading my Mark IV and trying to find a CC, SNG, on Blade Traders on Facebook, here's this knife for sale or trade, and one of the things that the owner of this knife wanted in trade was a Dauntless Mark IV. So I had to kick in a little bit of cash, but we made the trade. And the knife is basically perfect, with one little sign that it's a Strider. I don't know if you can see if I can get the camera to pick this up. Right near the tip, we've got some scrapes there. I think you can see them in the shadow. They go from spine to cutting edge, or on that side, and then on this side they just barely appear right here near the spine. If I didn't tell you about them, you might have watched the whole video and never noticed. But you know what? This is a Strider, so who cares, right? Let's see. So it's been used a little bit, but the handle shows absolutely no signs of use or abuse. There might be a scrape on the clip and I lost it. Can't find it anymore, but that's it. Blade centering, and this one's tuned up about as well as I can tune this particular Strider. The centering's perfect, obviously. Action's pretty doggone good. It is not quite a free dropper with the ball detent off the blade, but it's close enough. The detent is strong enough that the deployment action is good. I mean, there's enough detent there. And certainly enough to retain the blade. You can't flick it open like that. And here's another thing about Striders. I sort of tend to close them a little roughly. And I don't like it when a Strider detent lets the blade bounce off the stop. And this one just doesn't. You can close it about as hard as you want, and it won't bounce off the stop. That was rough, and it didn't bounce off. That's just me and my sort of Strider stuff. I like this knife a lot. One thing, and like I said, you know, I'm not the most experienced Strider guy in the world, but I've handled enough of them to know that the Lockup has a mind of its own. I mean, it really does. This knife will lock up. I'm going to open it softly. Okay, so that locked up at about, I don't know, what would you guys say, 35%, okay? And it'll have no stick, listen. None at all. Okay, if I do a middle finger spidey flick and the knuckle of my thumb sort of resting on that lock bar a little bit. Okay, so I put some pressure on that as it was locking up. Well, I guess it didn't really go deep that time. Sometimes it'll go to 50, 55%. See, no lock stick that time. Okay, this time I'm really pressing. Okay. All right, so now we're close to 50, and you hear just a little stick. Well, and you'll notice I've got Sharpie on the blade tang. Every time I ever take a Strider apart, put it back together, not every time, 90% of the time it's got lock stick, sometimes significant. So I always reassemble them with Sharpie and let them sort of break back in. And here's the story on this one. When I took there you hear some stick. I put it back together with Sharpie. It was great. After a few days, the Sharpie starts wearing off. I start getting stick. Reapply the Sharpie. Same story. Then I thought, man, there's a big bare spot on my blade tang. So, okay, my break-in must be over. I was getting no lock stick at all. A couple days later, I'm sticking bad. And so I went with the third application of Sharpie, and that's where we are now. We're a few days into the third application, and it's perfect. You know, occasionally I have no stick. Occasionally I have just a little stick to let you know it's there. Nothing that ever, hurts your finger to release it or anything like that. Which, you just have to know that going in. Your Strider lockup will be different every time you pick it up. Not much you can really do about it. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. Now, if you're sort of in the non-Strider mindset, that can drive you nuts. In fact, it can drive you so nuts it makes you want to sell the knife. You can develop this attitude that says, if I have to put Sharpie on the blade tang, the knife is junk, I don't want it. How could you ever sell something like that for, what's a CC, 475 bucks that has lock stick? And I get that. I've been there. I'm like that with most knives. In fact, I have a mid-tech in the house right now that the maker sent me for review. I've had it for almost a month, and I can't decide whether to review it or send it back because sometimes I open it and it sticks so bad I have to pull this direction on the blade just to get it to unlock. And so it's just one of those things, guys. You either sort of appreciate the Strider SNG for its soul and you overlook or deal with or make allowances for things it doesn't do well, or you should never buy one. And you know what? After much consternation, deliberation, and waffling, I've decided that I really like to own an SNG, especially in this concealed carry configuration. And if it's got some Striderisms about it, okay. So, okay, why? I don't much care for the mixed Strider story, and I don't much care for the, let's say, inconsistencies in the knife, and they don't have good fit and finish. And I don't think they're probably as strong as people perceive them to be. Well, here's what they are. They are so good in hand. I mean, so good. And, you know, for what's sort of recognized as the first high-end, hard-use tactical knife, you know, and that's a niche in the market that has, you know, produced knives that have ballooned to the 7, 8, 9 ounce range. Let's see here. See if I can zero my scale. Okay. Let's see. How much does an SNG weigh in concealed carry form? How about 4.1 ounces, boys and girls? Yeah, how about that? Now we are talking. So it is a very strong knife, but it doesn't weigh too much. And here, look at this. How about the grind and the edge? Now, this has got my edge on it. I can't remember if I sharpened this at 16 or 17 degrees per side on the secondary bevel, but just look at how consistent the width is. At the heel, all the way to the tip, almost exactly the same. And this is a full flat ground SNG. So very thin. I think the inclusive angle of this main blade grind is only 5 or 6 degrees, like 3 degrees per side. So we're coming down from what, 3/16 of an inch material stock down to 25 thousandths ish behind the edge. It's a great slicer. I mean, a wickedly great slicer. Oops, I ran out of blade. If I do this right, it's a great slicer. And it gets wicked sharp. This one's an S30V, which I think is kind of interesting because it's a fairly recent knife. I think 2014 or 2015, they ran a bunch of S30V, which is okay with me. Not much difference in performance between S30 and S35. Here's another thing, guys. Over the last couple years, they've run a lot of knives, Strider has, with the 3/4 grind. So you've got a much wider flat, comes down to about the bottom of the thumb hole, and then it is hollow ground, a lot like a Dauntless Mark IV. Well, here's what I find on that. A knife that at the edge is really thin through here, that thickens a lot at the tip, and it thickens again back here. Even with the, you know, inch, almost an inch of blade that you lose between finger choil and sharpening choil, it's still not done. It's still plunging. It's just not, it's not a good grind. It's not as good a slicer as this. It's probably not as strong as this, except it does have more flat for prying, I guess, but damage that you might do to the blade in cutting, this is a stronger blade, and it's so much better ground, so much more precise. I'm always surprised how ugly the 3/4 grind knives are off the sharpening bench. You know, it's just not a good grind. It's not good. So I really love this. It took me a couple of years to get past this feature. You know, so much blade wasted. You know, it's 3.5 inches long, and it doesn't even have anywhere near 3 inches of cutting edge. And I sort of get it now. We got a long ricasso to accommodate a forward finger choil that gives you full width of stock thickness for your index finger. We've got a long plunge grind, and you guys have never heard me mention this before. There is a reason to use a long swooping plunge grind on a knife. You guys know what it is? Strength. Like take a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 where the ricasso ends and it's 90 degrees straight down to cutting edge. Well, that sharp 90-degree corner, two of them, one at the top here at the ricasso and one in the root of the plunge grind, that is a place for stress to develop. And if you were prying with the knife blade, you wouldn't with a paramilitary 2. They're not really designed to be doing that with, but you would with an SNG. They are designed for it. If you've got those sharp corners after heat treat in a finished grind, that's where your blade's going to break. So this nice, long, gradual plunge grind makes this blade a lot more able to handle sideways stresses. So if you're going to do that, you need to put this long sharpening choil in so we can have this nice, consistent edge grind. So with all the other things, objective reasons that I shouldn't like a Strider, this area of the knife and the cutting edge have gained my respect for good, solid blade engineering reasons. And I appreciate blades that are executed faithfully to good, solid engineering reasons. So goofy as it may be, I like this knife. Here's another aspect that makes me like it, and I don't talk about this much either, maybe never. I like knives with soul. I like knives that are original, I guess. That have some features or an overall design philosophy that came out of the mind of one man, and that same guy and his guys that work for him make that knife, and it has been significant and made a statement in the history of cutlery. And the Strider SNG definitely falls into that category. Other knives that do that for me, of course, the Buck 110, the Chris Reeves Sebenza, the Benchmade 710. Benchmade's now a big company, but they weren't always a big company. And the 710 is an icon. It's the first axis lock knife, and it's a great tactical blade to this day. Has a beautiful blade. I'm not, you take a knife that is what I would call a corporate knife, or a knife by committee, or a knife sold by a marketing company that doesn't make knives. So who are we talking about there? Well, we're talking about ZT, cold steel. I love cold steel, but I'm not passionate about cold steel. I love cold steel because you can buy such a great knife for the money. But those knives don't have soul. Maybe a Recon 1 just because of the sheer beauty of its clip point blade. But a ZT 0562, that knife has no soul. It's an adapted design from a knife that does have soul, the Rick Hinderer XM18, XM24 series. But it's mass produced. There are features of it that are obviously designed by committee. In reality, once you get one in your hand for a while, it's no Hinderer. It's something that looks like a Hinderer, with some features that were obviously production compromises, and some features that were marketing motivated features, like ball bearing pivots. I like knives with soul, that have cred, that are children of their father, so to speak. Oh, another one to throw into that lot would be anything from Great Eastern Cutlery. For the traditional knife guys, Bark River knives have soul. Spydercos have soul. Even Taiwan and Japanese made Spydercos, because the mind of Sal Glesser, the philosophy that goes behind a Spyderco, is so solid. So that's why, my friends, I have one of these temperamental, finicky, less than perfect, weird looking knives from a manufacturer with a nebulous past. It has soul. And by the way, the doggone thing just flat works. and it gets so scary sharp. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm sure that there will be days I pick this knife up and go, why did I ever buy another one of those things? So talk me off the wall if I'm talking about selling it, guys, because I know the day will come that I'll wish I hadn't, or something. Please feel free to give me solid counsel in the comments. That's all for this one. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember the word and my SNGCC are sharp.